Hello and welcome to Alchemy 101, the show that explores all avenues of transformation and aims to offer some useful nuggets that can support us in living in line with nature in a way that's true to our nature, no matter how contrary that might seem, just like this nightingale, the bird that sings out in the dark. I'm JJ, the Practical Alchemist, and I am delighted as ever that you've joined me today. The focus today is on retirement and how that affects your health. Now, I have to hold my hand up right now and say that I really can't see myself ever embracing the notion of coming to a time somewhere in the future where I'll withdraw, which is what retiring means after all, from doing what I do. But more on that later. First, here's Professor James Goodwin, who shared some of his knowledge about how retirement can affect our health. Professor Goodwin, as regular listeners might know, is Director of Science and Research Impact at the Brain Health Network. He's one of the world's foremost experts on brain health, and he's the author of the book Supercharge Your Brain. He also knows a lot about the effects of aging, as he was Chief Scientific Officer at Age UK and at one time advised the Centre for Better Aging in London, and he was advising them on research. Many people expect retirement to be the rosy twilight of their life, where they do all the things that they've put off doing all their lives. But the reality can be very different. And I put it to Professor Goodwin that retirement impacts our health in so many different ways.
Yes, it does. Retirement is supposed to be the gateway to a golden era of happiness and contentment. What I'd say to your listeners is that at the point at which anyone retires, you, me, the person on the number 10 omnibus, all this, you're already on a trajectory when you retire.
Yeah.
And it's whether or not retirement in itself changes that trajectory, which can influence how well you find that retirement. And what I mean by trajectory is the lifestyle that you've led, the circumstances of your life, the environment around you will have determined your health condition and your rate of aging. And if you're already in decline or you're not, you are aging very well, you're sharp as a button, you don't have any health problems, either of those scenarios, retirement may or may not change it depending on what the circumstances are beyond your retirement.
Yeah. So what are the things to, well, should we put it this way, watch out for? If you're about to retire, presumably there are certain things that you'll have done through your years previously that will, that aren't going to change or might be exacerbated in retirement. So there's not a lot you can do about that. What are the kind of things that you're talking about there? And then what are the things to look out for in retirement?
Retirement changes one's life in the following aspects. One, continuing to work, even part-time or on a reduced basis, gives challenge and mental demands which you might not have otherwise in retirement. So one of the conditions going forward is that any one of us should seek to engage in challenging activities or pursuits, or have some purpose in life or some goals, in order to maintain the kind of challenge that our working life gave us. As an individual, I've long since given up on the idea of a step change in retirement where one day you're working and the next you're not. I mean, I'm past state pension age, but I've continued to work. But the reason it's palatable is because I have control the hours, the work that I do and the hours that I work. Working also gives a social interaction. When I was the chief scientist in Age UK, we had many case studies where people continued to work because they lost social interaction in their lives, and the only place they had it was at work. So they were empty nesters. The children had left home, or even their friends and family had died, or were in circumstances of chronic ill health. And therefore, they found themselves socially isolated in many ways, and therefore came back to work, not because they needed the money, but because they needed that social interaction.
How important is that social interaction?
Embedded in the brain over 1.5 million years, we've got a capability called social cognition, and that has developed as a means of survival as we evolved from being hunter-gatherers. Humans would never have reached the pinnacle of our biological status if it hadn't been for working in a group. Working as individuals, we would have been picked off one by one. The circumstances and the power of nature around us would have been very harmful to any evolutionary progress. What I'm trying to say is, JJ, we're social animals, and the need to mix with other people is embedded in the brain for 1.5 million years. And this is why I said that, along with Lord Sumption, that the lockdown and social isolation during the pandemic was one of the most wicked things that we could have done. And I don't swallow this argument that the expert bodies thought about this. I don't think they gave it a moment's notice. If they had, they wouldn't have enforced lockdown on us. Loneliness and even social isolation for a social animal like ourselves is cruel and unusual treatment.
Yeah.
And loneliness leads to chronic mental decline. Our thinking skills could deteriorate really quickly. Harvard did a 12-year study looking at how people aged with respect to their social circumstances and their thinking skills, their cognition. What they found was that over 12 years, those who declared themselves to be chronically lonely, that is, they felt really lonely at least once per week, they aged and their memory declined 12 times faster than those who didn't.
That's extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that really is extraordinary.
So one of the circumstances of retirement is keep people around you.
Yeah.
This is one reason why I think Stephen Hawking said in his pieces of advice was, I never stop working.
Yes.
And he never retired, but he changed his lifestyle. So he wasn't working in an office 9 till 5 every day of the week.
Mm.
And of course, not everybody's life is the same. If you're on a building site or you're in an industry involving heavy manual labor, or you've got acute demands on you, not just in construction, but in engineering or in the NHS, if you're a carer, you can't keep going until you're 70, 75 and so on. But there are those who are fortunate and are in professions where they can slow down a little, take the pressure off, ease themselves into doing the things that they want to do, spend more time with their families and their grandchildren. Now, that's the perfect amalgam to me, because it offers a mitigation for mental decline, and also enables them to maintain their income at the same time.
Yes, and then people who have given up any work as such. We talked before we started recording this about my father. When he retired at the age of 60, he played golf every day. And I guess the golf, A, it gave him some exercise, B, he got out into nature, but C, there was that social interaction because there's always the 19th hole. And, he would play with a golfing buddy every day. Yes. So that seemed to keep him going. And he lived into his 90s.
We know that one of the kinds of activities which helps us to maintain our cognition, our thinking skills, are activities where there's a constant degree of learning involved, where you either set the baseline for yourself or you learn with others in a group situation, and that learning activity will actually regenerate the brain. golfing, I would say, if you're pushing yourself to your own standard or to the standard of others in a group, that is going to be cognitively stimulating to the point where it will slow down any decline in your thinking processes.
Yeah. And he only stopped playing golf when he got to his 80th birthday because his knees gave way and he couldn't get out of the bunkers. So it wasn't his brain. It wasn't a brain thing. It was just a physical failure because his body started to, give up on him a little bit. But
the risk of chronic long-term illness, arthritis is one of those, osteoarthritis is one of those, falls during retirement if it's a productive retirement. If you're staying in the garden for most of the year, apart from the winter months, and that's all you do, then that is not what I would call a challenging environment out of the full-time working environment. I would not like to do that. And I'd encourage any of your listeners to take up challenging, purposeful activities and phase yourself probably into retirement. Now, if you have to leave work because those are the rules, and there's certain countries in the world where it's the rule at 55.
Yeah.
So in France, they're struggling with this at 62 to 64.
Yeah.
In Korea, you're made to retire at age 55. And most people after the age of 55, probably got 40 years ahead of them, start small businesses. That's how they cope with it. But 80% of the population in Korea is employed by 5 major companies, like Sony.
Gosh, really? Yeah.
Yeah. So, and they're given a huge check when they retire. Astonishing. Some of them smoke it and booze it away and just have a good time. Just spend it all, very quickly. Others might invest it in a small business. Some people gamble it away. Some people might buy a yacht. But it is a problem for them in Korea. And there was a huge conference, 2017 that I went to in Korea. And that was the major theme of the business, which was discussing how people extended their working lives from 55.
Interesting. Yeah. Because I can't imagine that anybody would really want to just put their feet up at the age of 55. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe people do. But it would seem to me to be such a waste of your life if you're just going to sit
I think you've got to be extremely confident and sure of yourself to retire early and to have a massive amount of money, especially in these days of high inflation. I mean, if we just think of the ages involved, if you start work at 25 and you retire at 65, you've had 40 working years. If you retire earlier, 55, that's 30 working years. Then what's your age of death? Life expectancy in Britain at age 65 is about 85. So you've got at least 20 years to maintain yourself and whatever wealth you've put together. Now, for those actuaries amongst you, start working out the effective inflation on a £30,000 a year pension. And I know that most people don't have a £30,000 a year pension. And the purchasing power of that pension, it's a fixed income, is going to go down. So this is one of the considerations that you have to make. And it's true, the research shows it. Early retirement gives you a 2.6% less chance of dying early. I can understand why, because that's to do with the levels of stress.
Yeah.
And most people who want to retire early, I guess, are in a working environment which they perceive to be enormously stressful.
Yes, I can understand that.
Need to leave it behind. So the data does support them, but retirement doesn't categorically harm or benefit your health. That's a really great point for listeners. Does not categorically harm or benefit health. It's how you lead your life up to your retirement and how you lead your life afterwards.
Well, I was going to come back to that and ask you about that. Yes. So, because for a lot of people, they see maybe their parents or grandparents retiring and they see their health declining, but it's not a given. It isn't a given.
Well, the trajectory that you're on can either be a fast one or a slow one. So some people age very quickly, and at 55, they look 75. Other people age very slowly. At 75, they look the reverse. They look 55.
Yeah.
What are the reasons for that? Well, one is the hand of cards that life deals you in terms of your DNA, but that's only 25% of it. And I'd like to get the point over that your fate in life and your health in later life is not set in stone. 25% of it is due to DNA. The other 75% is due to our lifestyle conditions.
Yeah. And those lifestyle conditions leading up to your retirement as well, not just what you do after you've retired.
Absolutely. You're already on a trajectory. It's like an aircraft sailing through the sky. Whatever level you're on, try changing it. Yes, it can be changed. But one of the most difficult things to alter is people's behavior.
Yes, exactly.
I know that's my behavior.
Yeah.
What's the best guide to what your post-retirement health behavior will be like? What you did before you retire.
Yes, it's all about the healthy habits we form in life, and the earlier that we can form them, the better. More on that in a moment, as it's time right now for a short break. We'll be back with more from James Goodwin after this from our station sponsors.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
And you're listening to Alchemy 101 here on UK Health Radio with me, JJ, the Practical Alchemist, and my guest today, Professor James Goodwin, who was saying before the break that if you want to know what your retirement will be like, take a look at your behaviours now. And it brought back a memory for me. Yes, and it reminds me of a time when both of my parents have passed away now, but some years ago I was looking after them. And somebody said to me, "Oh, great, so you can really cook them some healthy food." I said, "Well, why?" Well, my father had a horror of green vegetables, apart from asparagus, which he loved. But, don't give him a bit of lettuce. And that was for rabbits, right? And he liked potatoes because, being Scottish, we all love potatoes, right? But he wasn't really that keen on the vegetable side of a meal. And so I just let him go, but he lived into his 90s.
Yeah.
So
one observation I've made, JJ, is that individual differences, that's the differences between one person to another, are absolutely huge.
Yeah.
And the advice that scientists like myself give are based on population studies, and it's based on risk. So for most people, it's a bad idea not to exercise.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean that a lot of people who don't exercise won't live a long life.
Yes.
It's how you stack up everything in your life. All the numbers matter. And the more you can get on your side, the better off you will be. And I wouldn't like to take a chance on how my health is going to fall later in life. I'd want to do something about it. I wouldn't like to rely on medical help as to how I do after retirement. It would be, but, relying upon the medical profession to cure one disease at a time.
Yeah.
I want to get underneath those diseases and find out what the circumstances are that will make it less likely that I'll get cancer, less likely that I'll get dementia, less likely that I'll get a heart attack. I might end up with them. Right. But I wouldn't like to trust my life to this fatalistic idea that whatever happens, I can do nothing about. That's the one thing that science has taught us, that we're understanding human nature and human health far, far better. If you go back to medieval times, you wouldn't want to rely on the advice that the witch doctors were handing out about, what made you live longer or healthier or whatever. But now we know so much more. that you would be ill-advised not to listen to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. And so, yeah, I agree with you. I mean, it's better to work out, how you can mitigate against any of these things happening to you than just going along in life quite blithely, ignoring everything, and then suddenly you're struck down by something. But getting back to my parents again as well, they both lived into their 90s. My mother was 97, and they ate natural, pretty much local and natural food. Their diet was actually quite good. So when people would say to me, oh, that's not healthy because they're not eating their greens, and your father's not eating vegetables, that is true. He didn't. However, he did eat very well. What he ate was of very good quality. They didn't do ready meals so much. That wasn't a thing.
We're so very far removed, JJ, from what I would call an evolutionary natural diet.
Mm.
And I say this all the time on your show: you can't untoast what's been toasted. you can't magic away the chemistry of the body on the basis of some health story. I don't want to pick on any particular approach to eating or not. But there are certain basic requirements that have been evolved into our brains and evolved into our bodies. You'd be very, very ill-advised not to appreciate and understand those. And the biggest one, talk about your parents' natural diet. The biggest problem, a diet to date, so very narrow, and it consists of ultra-processed foods, UPFs.
Yep.
They are the real problem. They've got all the wrong things in them, and what's more, you can't control them.
Yeah.
If you cook your own food, it's cheaper than ultra-processed food in the long run. It's cheaper, and you can control what's in it. And diet is extraordinarily important for health, but it's not the only thing. There's many, many other things too.
Oh, yeah. And we've talked about that a lot before as well, about all the different factors that come into it. And, I'm fascinated by how the trajectory changes as we move into retirement or not. So for a lot of people, retirement is an absolute no-no. And a lot of people are very active and their brains are active, their bodies are fit. And so they go through well into their 80s and more, not retiring. I mean, what is it does that help people? Does not retiring help people, some people, as opposed to retiring and taking it easy?
The answer to that is the answer to the question, how are you living your life when you retire, and what kind of retirement have you had? That's the answer to that.
Yeah.
So some people will just want to leave their working life behind and escape to a bright future. Well, if everything is set up in place for that, and you know the kind of things that you should be doing, and I mentioned them, you must engage in challenging activities and not drift. If you drift without a sense of purpose, and there isn't a challenge in your life which tests you in a nice way, not in a difficult way, then you're going to have problems with your retirement or your break from work. A big one is attitude. Your listeners may not know that those with a positive attitude in life, measurably more positive than others, are going to be living 7 to 8 years longer than those who've got a bad attitude to life. That's incontrovertible. And there are reasons for that. If you've got a good attitude to life, you're positive. The glass is half full and not half empty. Life is on your side. Things are going to go well. I'm confident. I can do things. I can look after myself, or I can look after others. That kind of positive attitude is anti-aging. It is rejuvenating. It improves your sense of control. It lowers your risk of depression, lowers the risk of physical illnesses that we were talking about. Stress levels go down. And one of the reasons why is how you think can determine your brain chemistry. Mm-hmm. That's a two-way street. So your brain chemistry determines how you think, but also the willfulness of how you let your mind work or wander or concentrate on certain things, that can improve your brain chemistry. So that will produce an increase in well-being, and it will be antidepressive, anti-anxiety.
So when you're talking about improving brain chemistry, you're talking about things like serotonin, and dopamine, that kind of chemical, are you?
Absolutely right. We know over the last 200 years of looking at the brain, what the chemistry is and how it facilitates our feelings, our emotions, our thinking, and our behavior. And much of the brain depends upon the activity of transmitter substances. These are chemical messages that leap from nerve to nerve in the brain and facilitate our state of mind. So cortisol, highly stressful. Serotonin, that's the balancing hormone that helps us to keep an even keel between negative emotions like fear, anger, displeasure, and positive emotions like joy and elation and happiness. Dopamine is part of the brain's reward system. Oxytocin is the bonding hormone that helps us to form good social relationships. If there are imbalances in those transmitter substances, problems will arise in our thinking, in our feeling, and in our behavior. And they're even implicated in terms of mental health.
Yeah.
Now, mental health and having a sound mind, whoa, that's an awesome adventure to study. On the one hand, we understand what makes the brain healthy and what stops it from degenerating, neurodegeneration, all the crippling diseases like Parkinson's, dementia, Alzheimer's, and so on. On the other hand, we can't translate all that electrochemistry in the brain into how the mind works.
Yeah.
I find the study of the mind as equally boggling as the study of the brain.
It is fantastic. It is extraordinary. It's fantastic. Yeah. Yeah. So bearing in mind all these things that we've been talking about just now, if I was to ask you, James, what should I be doing if I'm coming up to retirement and I'm going to take that retirement? What is it that I should be looking to do to ensure that I will have as few health problems as possible in that retirement? Is there a formula that you could offer, or is it really down to the individual?
There's a formula and it's got millions of factors in it. So those of your listeners who know what the factors are in a mathematical equation, it's not 2 or 3 factors. There are hundreds of factors in determining your health across your life and through retirement. But some of them are more important than others. So some of them it will be 100x plus 3y. So x will be 30 times more important than y. Okay, so what's some of these then? Physical activity and exercise. So the government lays out, and this is all governments across the world, government lays out the basic requirements by age now. So if you go to the government website here, NHS, and you look at exercise requirements at age 65, you'll find it, and it's 150 minutes of purposeful exercise per week. But that's only one side of the coin. The other one is, if you do your exercise, 5 half-an-hour walks per week, or you go jogging or play tennis or play bowls or those kind of things, if you do that and then you go home and you sit down all day, or and you spend the rest of the time, as a couch potato watching daily TV programs and do very little, that undermines the benefit of the exercise. It negates it,
yeah.
So it's exercise and physical activity. That is enormously important. Only 1 in 5 people in Britain follow those recommendations. 1 in 5. That means 4/5, the vast majority of the population, can look out and can hope for poor health in later life, because not only they might not be exercising and being physically active after they've retired, they haven't done it before they've retired. So it's making it your way of life. That's a big one. Another one would be diet, and we just haven't got the time.
No, we haven't got the time to go into that.
Talk about that. That's probably we may have talked about it
we have talked about it before, and I've done other shows talking about diet. So the information's out there.
The main thing about diet is our Western diet is woefully narrow.
Yeah,
and we need to widen it and look after the microbes in our gut, as well as our, our bodily requirements, look after their requirements as well. Because your brain, your state of mind depends as much on the microbes in the gut as on anything else. It's astonishing. Mm-hmm. Absolutely astonishing. Mm-hmm. That in itself is probably scope for a whole program. So diet.
Yeah.
The third big one would be sleep. Now, let me tell you about sleep. Everybody, or the advice to populations is that most people need 7 to 8 hours of sleep per 24 hours.
Yeah.
Now, why do we frame it like that and not say 7 to 8 hours per night? The reason is that sleep, the pattern of sleep, changes as we age, and therefore we have to accommodate them. So as we get older, we don't need less hours of sleep. What we find is that we go down into sleep more slowly and come out of it more quickly. So you don't get a sustained period of sleep. You are coming to the surface more frequently during the night. Men possibly have to get up to the night as well because of prostate problems, and you can go to the bathroom. Right? So how do we deal with that? We deal with that by napping, but again, you've got to do it carefully. Shouldn't nap for more than 40 minutes at a time. If you nap for more than 40 minutes, you drive down the sleep molecule, or one of them, in the blood, so that by the time you go to bed, there isn't enough of it to make you sleepy.
Yeah.
So you defeated the whole purpose of it. Mm-hmm. So sleep for 40 minutes. That makes up for your fragmented sleep during the night, maybe 2 periods of 40 minutes, but don't go beyond that. And try and adjust to your changing pattern of sleep. Now, there's a chapter in my book, Supercharge Your Brain, which people can read, a very good chapter on sleep. And there's another book called Why We Sleep, by another renowned British scientist. I'm trying to remember his name, Matthew Walker, I think his name is.
Okay.
Why We Sleep. A great book. So you can get advice on this. Yeah. And doctors know very little about nutrition and food, and very little about sleep. And they probably also know very little about exercise either. So these are 3 areas where your doctor can't help you. I've talked to doctors about this. I asked one of my friends who is, he's a geneticist and metabolic physician. And I said to him, how much did you learn about nutrition and food and health at university, medical school? He said, nothing. We spent no time on it. It's not in the curriculum. I know. And then I said, how much did they teach you about sleep, physiology of sleep, chemistry of sleep? No, nothing about that either. And what about exercise? No, we left that to the sports scientists. Mm-hmm. So you can't go to your doctor for this advice. But then that's a sweeping generalization. You usually can't go to your doctor. If you've got a widely read, very wise physician, he or she will know all about this stuff anyway. But the majority of doctors coming out of medical school, they can't find it.
I know. Well, just as well, we have people like you talking about all of this, and shows and things like UK Health Radio, where you can actually learn about this stuff. Sure. and be prepared for what might lie in front of you. Certainly future-proof yourself against having issues later on in life. Well, James, we've come to the end here now. I think those are really great points, the important things to bear in mind as you face retirement, or if you're in retirement, and at least you can help to mitigate against any issues that might arise. But once again, thank you so much. And yes, Supercharge Your Brain, excellent book. As I've said before on this show, people should read it. It is very, very good, very interesting, lots of fantastic information in there. So once again, James, thank you very, very much for coming on the show and talking about this, and hopefully giving people a few pointers if they're leading up to retirement, not even leading up to retirement. If you're in your 20s or 30s, remember that what you do now will impact you in your retirement. So, brilliant. Thanks so much.
Always a pleasure to be on your show, JJ. Thank you.
It puts planning for your retirement in a totally different light, doesn't it? Makes so much sense, though. And as I said earlier, I can't see myself retiring as such anytime soon. Why? Well, because I'm on a mission and I have too much to do. Also, I don't consider what I do to be work in the normal sense. So how does the saying go again? If you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And yes, I feel that having a passion for what you do lights you up and gives you energy no matter what age you are. So I can't see myself ever wanting to put my feet up and just coasting through whatever time I have left. But more on how to have a healthy retirement after we take another break for more from our station sponsors.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
And you're listening to Alchemy 101 here on UK Health Radio, the world's #1 talk health radio station. And back to retirement. Now, I might not be looking to put my feet up anytime soon, but that's not to say I haven't felt some changes as I get older. I've learned to work in a way that suits me, just as Professor Goodwin shared with us, and say no to anything that I feel won't be a fit for me. And food is huge. Now, Professor Goodwin has talked about that before on this show, and here's a taste, if you'll excuse the pun, of what he had to say about diet and how we should be eating.
Well, first of all, go plant mad. Go plant mad. Widen the range of fruits and vegetables and anything that grows naturally, and just eat out on plants. But don't give up meat. Now, I'll tell you why. Because a meat-free diet is unnatural. Now, amongst your listeners, there'll be people saying, how dare I say that? Well, I dare to say it because it's scientifically proven. Right? We need to eat meat and fish. But what we've done in the West, is we've gone meat mad in the West. Let me give you an example. Spaghetti bolognese was unknown in Italy until Italians went to America. And there, the agricultural largesse produced large amounts of meat that was cheap and plentiful, and so people threw meat into everything. You go back to pre-19th century Italy, people didn't put meat because they couldn't afford to eat it, right? They couldn't put meat in there, but they did eat some meat. They did. And if you go back to our hunter-gatherer days, our brains have evolved over that long period of time, 1.5 million years. And the reason our brains are much bigger than the brains of all other animals is because we were able to hunt and catch meat and fish. And that resulted in our brains being enormously, much larger than other primates. And also it reduced the size of our gut. So we became more mobile. And because we became more mobile, we became better at hunting and gathering and eventually farming. Farming was precipitated by climate change. It became warmer. The reason our guts decreased in size is because plants are very dilute. They're mostly water. You take a leaf of anything, it's 90% water. You can prove that easily by putting it into an oven at 100 degrees Celsius, weighing the leaf before we put it in and weighing it when it comes out, dried out completely. It's 10% of the weight it went in. So animals who are completely herbivorous have to spend all day eating because the food is mostly water and they have to eat tons of it to get enough of the calories and nutrients. This is one reason why sheep chew the cud. People don't understand this. They have to eat all day. But to eat all day, you have to be out in the middle of the plain or in the open where all the grasses and foods are growing. And if you do that, you're open to predators, so you get killed. So the answer was those animals that could chew it all and swallow it all quickly and then beat a retreat back into shelter and then re-chew it and re-swallow it, they were the ones who survived. But they had to eat enormous amounts of food. Now, if you're eating meat and fish, you don't have to eat enormous amounts of food to get all the nutrients that you need. But you don't have to go over the top, as we've done in the Western world, and eat meat or fish 3 times a day. I would say eat it 3 times a week, but don't give it up. And the reason is brain chemistry is dependent upon the food molecules which are found in meat and fish. Absolutely. You can get it by supplementing, but you know what? What I know about supplements tells me I'm not going to risk the health of my brain on swallowing a few tablets.
That's interesting. So you would say eat meat, but not every day. I mean, is there a detrimental effect on the brain by eating meat or fish every day? Or are you just saying that for general health, restrain ourselves when it comes to eating meat?
Well, eating too much meat, too much fish, it oversupplies the body with high energy, high density food molecules. And all the degenerative diseases of the Western world, which are brought about by our over-rich diet and by not exercising, all those diseases are bad for the brain. So if you get diabetes, high glucose concentrations, well, we need glucose or ketones in the brain continuously in order to keep it alive and functioning well. But when you get to the levels that diabetes pumps into the brain, that's too much glucose. And then you get narrowing of the arteries. And you get that produces things like vascular dementia or hardening of the arteries in the brain. And the arteries in the brain are really fragile because they're not supported by all the tissue around it. The brain is largely water. It's a bag of salty water in its simplest form. That's what it is. So that eating too much meat and fish has contributed with our sedentary lifestyle to the degenerative diseases like cardiovascular disease in the Western world. And we know that they are detrimental to brain health. So I would say, don't eat meat and fish 3 times a day. Eat them 3 times a week. You need them because of the nutrients in them. I can talk about that if you wish. So
I'm thinking about the normal British household, maybe who would have a big breakfast and maybe more at weekends now, a full English or Scottish or Irish breakfast. And then they'd go on to have something at lunchtime, which might be, meat. Maybe they think something light as a sandwich or something like that, but, something meat-based. And then they would have, something like fish and chips in the evening. That's not great for anybody, is it?
I think if we look back a few hundred years in both agriculture and industry in Britain, so you're talking about the early 1800s, most people had highly demanding manual jobs. I grew up in the 1950s in an industrial area, and both men and women worked enormously hard, and they ate those 3 meals a day in the way that you say, and there was no one was overweight and there was no obesity, and there were very few allergies as well, very few. I can't remember as a child encountering anyone in my schools who had an allergy. 1 or 2 people, maybe, you could probably remember. Now, every 5 minutes, some child has got an allergy. So that heavily demanding lifestyle of high levels of physical labor do require those 3 large meals a day. But life has changed. Very few people, I'm going to hazard a guess now, maybe 10% of us have, manual jobs. And I was in the army for 25 years, and I wasn't driving a desk either, or pushing a pen. I was in the infantry, and I was in the infantry until I was 55. And I never put on any weight in all that time. Why? Constantly physically active, and I needed that high nutrient diet. So you have to think about the lifestyle you're leading as well as what you're eating. But by reducing meat and fish in the diet, you are approaching an optimum level for good brain health and actually good bodily health as well.
Sleep is a big issue too, and I've had to make changes to ensure that I get enough sleep. I'm naturally a night owl, and you can often see me still beavering away at midnight and beyond, which meant that getting up at 7 a.m. to go for my daily swim had to stop. That takes me to exercise. Now, I don't play golf every day like my father. I don't have the time because I haven't retired, and really I've got no intention of doing so, as I keep saying. I still swim most days, something I never thought I'd do in the sea around the UK ever again. But then lockdown happened, and it became not just a way of exercising, but of a socialising too. And that was one of the positives to come out of that tragic affair, not just for me, but for a whole lot of people up and down the country. And as you get older, that community spirit, that togetherness really is important, as Professor Goodwin was saying. And then we come to stress. Stress all through our lives, of course, is a major factor in health. You know, when I work with people to support them in bringing their body back into balance, when I do my energy work, I always make sure that people are de-stressed first. And if you're interested in knowing how I do that, I've recorded the process and you can listen to it on my website, thepracticalalchemist.uk. So head over there and have a listen if you want to just relax and just let go of all your stress. A word of warning though, please do not listen while you're driving or operating any machinery. Just make sure you're sitting comfortably or lying down. It's a great way to relax any time that you're feeling stressed, and it'll only take you a few minutes. And with that, we've come to the end of the show. I hope some of the information we've discussed here might help you. And remember, you can listen to all of our shows on all the main podcast platforms these days. And if you like what you hear, or if they've helped you, do help us spread the word by sharing them. You never know, it might be just what someone you know needs to hear. Also, check out the show I co-host with psychiatrist and coach Dr. Mark Goulston here on UK Health Radio, and it's called Hurt Less, Live More, and it's the place for raw, open, uplifting and hopefully enlightening conversations that will help you let go of some of those hurts that we all internalize for so long, and they do us so much harm. And now for even more health information, there's our sister publication, Health Triangle Magazine, and that's a monthly magazine that's full of great features complementing our radio shows. And you can subscribe online at ukhealthradio.com. So thank you for listening today. Do head over to my website. Again, it's thepracticalalchemist.uk to find out more about me and how to stay in touch. And then join me for more alchemy here on UK Health Radio and the UK Health Radio podcast next time. Until then, it's goodbye from me and that nightingale.